Hello everybody, Last Minute Axel back again with another last minute video. The third book of the month, I'm done. I been done. I finished on the 27th. I kind of tortured myself with this one. I read like 3/4 of it in one night because I wanted to do like a Frankenstein marathon type video, but I decided to abandon it. So I ended up just reading it in one night for nothing, but this is more of a regular review unlike my last one. The reason why I wanted to do a regular review for this one is because it is the first classic book of the series. If you don't know, classic literature is my favorite genre of book. Classic literature books are what got me into reading. I read like Catcher in the Rye in 1984 is like some of my first books, and I really liked both of them. I was super excited to add this one to my read list. I have been wanting to read the complete classic bare bones horror stories like Dracula and Frankenstein for so long. So reading this one was very exciting, especially because this book is a lot better than I thought it would be. I honestly expected this book to be pretty boring because I thought that the story was like cut and dry, the story of Frankenstein that everyone just like tells and alludes to around the dinner table. It was actually a lot deeper and a lot more interesting than that, especially at like specific parts that I didn't even know existed in the book. I guess we can just hop right into the review. The weird thing about this one is that so many people already have like preconceived notions and misconceptions about this book. Like probably the most common one is that they think that the monster is named Frankenstein, even though it is the scientist and the monster actually has no name. Another one that I had is I thought that the creation of Frankenstein's monster was like the main event of the book, and that's like where it would climax. But bro, that happened like less than a quarter of the book in, and the rest of the book was a lot of different other stuff, and I was surprised by that. I sat down on like the 24th to read this book, and I opened it up and I saw that Walton was writing letters to his sister, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just going to be another book where people just write letters the whole time. And I was annoyed, and I stopped reading it like 10 pages in for like 3 days. That's why I finished it on the 27th, because I just read it all in one day. I was like, I'll struggle to halfway through, and then halfway through he'll create the monster and we'll be good. But then he created the monster like instantly. So if I had just held out, it would have been fine. But the book also manages to stay interesting even when Frankenstein's monster isn't on screen or on the page, despite it being a main aspect of the book and why people have paid attention to the story over the years. Before I say anything further, I just want to give a little bit of appreciation to Mary Shelley herself. Dude, she wrote this in 1818, and it still inspires horror writers to this day, even though it's not even a very scary story, to be fully honest. Like, there are some suspenseful parts of it, but I wouldn't consider it like a horror story. It's more sci-fi, and lots of people do consider it to be one of the first sci-fi books ever written, and it kind of did pioneer both genres, which is even more crazy because she was 19 when she wrote this book in 1818. She did revise it later in 1831, and I had the 1831 copy, and I was kind of devastated to learn that because I wanted to read as old as possible because I just like seeing what people were writing about in that time. But no, the 1831 edits are actually seen as a better edit of the book, so I'm not that mad. People talk about how good this book is, and I'm talking about it right now, but like, what actually makes it good? Why do people like Frankenstein? First of all, it was an original idea at the time, and it was a very creative one back then as well. And like, Frankenstein's monster just lives on as like one of the most iconic parts of pop culture history. And so the idea was revolutionary. Next, the like world building and the setting changes in this book, like when they go to Mont Blanc and they have that meetup, the Frankenstein and his monster, it's just, I thought that this would take place like in a lab for the whole book. And it manages to change the setting around, change the events that happen in the book. The book shifts focus from Frankenstein's monster to the characters that surround Victor Frankenstein himself many times in this book. And it doesn't feel like it's taking any attention away from the overarching story, which is very impressive to say the least. It's difficult to pinpoint what makes Frankenstein such a good classic, and I was kind of worried to review this book because I was like, what do I even review? Like, it's just the same story that everyone already knows. But if you know the story of Frankenstein's monster, you should definitely read this book if you haven't, because it will definitely make you understand why it was so popular and is super popular to this day, why it is a world-renowned classic, and why Mary Shelley is considered like a treasure of classic authors. Regarding complaints of this book, a lot of people did say that it was super boring. And classics kind of always have that reputation of being boring because a lot of old books tend to be overly descriptive. And this book, like, I don't agree that it is overly descriptive or boring. But as I said, when I did open the book for the first time, I was kind of fed up, to say the least, with the note writing. But Walton as a character makes so much sense, and he starts the story off and bookends it perfectly. And so by the end, I really wasn't mad, even if some sections felt a tiny bit like a drag when I was going through them. I will say one funny Goodreads review that I saw was that the only horror part of this story was that they had to flip the page every time they got to the end of one. That is a funny one. I obviously don't agree. Yeah, I don't really know what much else to say. It tells the story of like obsession and isolation so well, and you start to wonder like, who's the real villain? Whoa, like 13-year-old philosopher here, but like it's true. And I feel like it was one of the earliest books to really do that and to flip the narrative where the monster might actually be the person that you end up rooting for. One thing that I liked about this book that like people don't really talk about when they talk about books, because they usually talk about the reading experience of the book, but one thing that is very important to me is how fast you feel like you're reading the book. At least in my copy, all of the chapters were like 5 pages max, and the text was squished together. But when you're turning the page 3 times and you already get to the next chapter, it makes it much more bearable to see that you're 2 out of 9 chapters away from Act 3. And that's one of the reasons why I loved all of the books that I read this month so much, was because they all felt like they went by fast and they were super enjoyable experiences. There's not much else to say about this book in specific. This month was an absolute home run. 3 out of 3. I rated 5 stars. I rated What I'd Rather Not Think About. I rounded it up to 5 stars, but honestly, I think I would just want to smack that 1 out of 5 star. That book is beautiful. Northwoods was a 5-star read. That book was amazing, and I got a cool video out of it. And Frankenstein, just a classic done right. If Mary Shelley was like a time traveler and she went back in time to like create the perfect classic, I would be like, yeah, makes sense. I did not expect it to like this much, but I loved it. That's my honest review of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I know this is a weird one. I kind of rapid fire went through it, but you know, it's the last video of the month and it's a book that everyone already knows about. So I'm just kind of spewing my nonsense and seeing where it goes. I do just want to say the geese video got 100 views the other day. I am so pumped about that. I'm excited to make more videos about music in the future. I've been locked in on reading for the end of this month, but I have a little bit of wiggle room before I give myself the courage to start Kingdom of Ash next month. Yeah, expect a music video or 2. But yeah, thank you guys so much for the support on these videos and on this channel. I love making these videos. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Make sure to keep reading.